6 young cheerleaders, full of dreams and energy, celebrating their second-place finish at a regional competition in Arizona. They called their parents, promising to check in again before heading home, but that call never comes. For 20 years, their families lived in agony, wondering what happened to their daughters. Then, in 2015, a hiker walking his dog through the Sonoran Desert made a discovery that would finally unlock the dark truth behind one of Arizona's most haunting mysteries. The story begins on a warm May evening in 1995 in Chandler, Arizona. 6. Teenage cheerleaders from the local high school had just finished competing in a regional cheerleading competition. April and Amber Green, twin sisters who were inseparable both on and off the mat. Kira Thompson, the team captain known for her infectious smile and leadership skills. Hannah Lee, the gymnast whose backflips always drew gasps from the crowd. Rachel Collins, the quiet one who found her voice through cheering. And Lily Rivera, the youngest of the group but with the biggest heart. These weren't just teammates. They were best friends who had spent years perfecting their routines, supporting each other through victories and defeats, and dreaming of taking their squad to state championships. After their performance that evening, they were buzzing with excitement. They had placed second, which was better than anyone expected, and they couldn't wait to get home and celebrate with their families. The last confirmed contact with the girls came around 9 p.m. when April called her mother, Marissa Green. Her voice was filled with joy as she described their performance and their placement. She promised to call again when they were leaving the venue, as was their family tradition. Marissa waited by the phone, ready to hear every detail of the evening. But that call never came. Initially, the parents weren't too concerned. Teenage girls, they reasoned, sometimes get caught up in the excitement of the moment. Maybe they went out for ice cream to celebrate, or perhaps they were just running late. But as hours turned into the next morning, worry began to creep in. Phone calls to other parents revealed that none of the girls had made it home. The Chandler Police Department launched an immediate investigation. The last place the girls were seen was at the competition venue, where security footage showed them leaving together around 10:30 p.m. Their coach, Vincent Caraway, told police he had left earlier, assuming the girls would find their own way home as they usually did after local competitions. The team van was found abandoned in the parking lot, with the girls' personal belongings still inside. Detective Holbrook was assigned as the lead investigator. He interviewed everyone who had been at the competition: judges, other teams, parents, facility staff. The trail seemed to go cold almost immediately. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses to any unusual activity, and no demands for ransom. It was as if 6 teenagers had simply vanished into thin air. The community rallied around the families in unprecedented ways. Search parties combed through the desert surrounding Chandler. Volunteers distributed flyers with the girls' photos. Throughout Arizona and neighboring states, the local news stations ran stories daily, keeping the case in the public eye. The high school retired their cheer squad numbers and held vigils every year on the anniversary of their disappearance. For the families, each day brought fresh agony. Marissa and David Green struggled to maintain hope while grieving daughters who might still be alive. They kept April and Amber's bedroom exactly as it had been, just in case. Every phone call brought a surge of hope that maybe, just maybe, their daughters were calling to say they were safe. Every knock on the door could be the police with news, either good or devastating. Detective Holbrook pursued every lead, no matter how small. There were reported sightings in California, Texas, even as far away as Florida. Each one required investigation, and each one led nowhere. The case file grew thicker, but the mystery only deepened. After 5 years of intensive investigation, with no breaks, The case was officially classified as cold, but the families never gave up. They hired private investigators, consulted with psychics, and followed up on tips that police no longer had resources to pursue. The pain never lessened. If anything, it grew worse with each passing year. Not knowing was worse than the worst news they could imagine, because it meant they could never truly grieve and never truly move on. 20 years passed. The families aged, but their love for the missing girls remained as strong as ever. The case had become part of Chandler's local lore, a tragic mystery that everyone knew about but no one could solve. Then, on a clear morning in 2015, everything changed. Chris Delaney was an experienced hiker who knew the Sonoran Desert like the back of his hand. He and his German Shepherd Max regularly explored the remote areas around Chandler, enjoying the solitude and natural beauty of the landscape. On this particular morning, Max began behaving strangely, pawing at what appeared to be just another patch of desert ground. Curious about his dog's behavior, Chris began to investigate. As he brushed away sand and debris, his hands hit something hard and metallic. After 20 minutes of careful digging, he unearthed a rusted suitcase that had clearly been buried for some time, though not as long as 20 years. With trembling hands, he opened the case. Inside were 6 sets of red and white cheerleading uniforms, sun-bleached but unmistakably from the Chandler High School squad. Chris had lived in the area long enough to remember the missing cheerleaders case, and he immediately understood the significance of his discovery. He called 911 without touching anything else, preserving what could be a crucial crime scene. Detective Holbrook, now retired but still haunted by the unsolved case, was contacted. Immediately, within hours, he was back at his old job, leading a team of investigators to the desert site. The forensic team confirmed that the uniforms belonged to the missing girls, identified by unique alterations and personalized details that their families had provided decades earlier. But the most puzzling aspect of the discovery was the condition of the suitcase. It had clearly been buried recently. The metal wasn't corroded enough for 20 years of burial, and the sand pattern suggested it had been disturbed within the last few months. Someone had kept these uniforms for 2 decades and then decided to bury them. The question was why. Detective Holbrook made the difficult decision to contact the families. After 20 years of silence, he now had to deliver news that was both hopeful and terrifying. The discovery of the uniforms meant someone had kept them all these years, which suggested the girls might have been alive for at least some time after their disappearance. But it also meant that someone had recently decided to dispose of evidence. Parents were devastated but also energized by the first real lead in 2 decades. They insisted on visiting the discovery site, hoping that being there might provide some insight or closure. Marissa and David Green drove to the desert location with the other families, their hearts heavy with 20 years of accumulated grief and hope. As they stood in the harsh desert landscape, examining the site where their daughter's uniforms had been found, Marissa noticed something in the distance. A truck was parked on a ridge about a quarter-mile away, and 3 men appeared to be loading something heavy into the bed. Their movements seemed furtive, almost panicked, and when they spotted the families and investigators, they hurriedly finished their work and sped away. David and Marissa decided to investigate the area where the truck had been parked. As they combed through the sand and sparse vegetation, Marissa's eyes caught something glinting in the afternoon sun. She bent down and picked up a small earring, a silver star with a red gem in the center. Her blood ran cold as she recognized it immediately. She had given identical earrings to both April and Amber for their 13th birthday, just 2 years before they disappeared. The girls had treasured them and wore them to every important event, including cheerleading competitions. Marissa's hand shook as she held the tiny piece of jewelry that represented the first tangible connection to her daughters in 20 years, The earring was immediately handed over to Detective Holbrook, who fast-tracked it for DNA analysis. The results confirmed what Marissa already knew in her heart. It belonged to one of her daughters. The investigation now had a specific location to focus on, and the mysterious truck provided their first real suspect lead. Working with the motor vehicle department, investigators traced the truck's license plate to a company called Caraway Performance and Fitness. The name sent chills through everyone involved in the case. Vincent Caraway had been the girls' cheerleading coach and one of the last people to see them alive. He had been questioned extensively during the original investigation, but had never been considered a serious suspect. When confronted with the connection, Caraway seemed genuinely surprised and concerned. He explained that he had sold the company years earlier and no longer had any connection to the business or its vehicles. The new owner, he said, was a man named Gerald Laffinger, who ran a ranch outside of town and had been using the fitness company as a front for his various business ventures. This revelation opened up an entirely new line of investigation. Detective Holbrook began researching Gerald Laffinger and quickly discovered a troubling pattern. The man had been investigated for various crimes over the years: tax evasion, suspected drug trafficking, and allegations of harboring undocumented workers. However, he had never been successfully prosecuted, always managing to avoid serious charges through legal technicalities and lack of concrete evidence. Investigation team decided to conduct surveillance on Laffinger's ranch. What they observed over the following weeks was deeply disturbing. The property appeared to be much larger than indicated on public records, with several buildings that didn't appear on official plans. There was unusual activity at all hours, with people coming and going under cover of darkness. Meanwhile, the families couldn't wait for official channels to move at their bureaucratic pace. Marissa and David Green decided to conduct their own investigation. They went to local businesses, showing photos of the earring and asking if anyone had seen similar jewelry. Their persistence paid off when a waitress at a local diner recognized the description. The waitress, whose name was Sarah, was wearing an earring that was identical to the one found in the desert. When questioned, she explained that it had been a gift from a regular customer who came in every few weeks. The customer had told her he worked at a ranch outside of town and that his boss was always giving away jewelry and gifts to keep the staff happy. Sarah agreed to help the desperate parents. She said the customer usually came in on Thursday evenings and she would be willing to let them follow her when she made her regular catering delivery to the ranch. She had been delivering food to Laffinger's ranch for months and knew the layout well enough to help them gain access. The plan was dangerous and potentially illegal, but the families felt they had no choice. 20 years of waiting had taught them that sometimes official channels move too slowly for people who were running out of time. If their daughters were somehow still alive, every day could be crucial. On the appointed Thursday evening, Marissa and David followed Sarah's catering truck to the ranch. The property was even more isolated and forbidding than they had imagined. High fences surrounded the compound, and security cameras were visible at regular intervals. Sarah had arranged to make her delivery at a side entrance away from the main gate, which would give the parents a chance to slip onto the property undetected. But their plan went wrong almost immediately. The men who had been at the desert site were at the ranch, and they recognized David and Marissa from their previous encounter. Rather than calling security or police, they forced the couple off the road and brought them directly to Gerald Laffinger. Laffinger was a man in his 60s, with cold eyes and an aura of barely contained violence. He seemed to take pleasure in the fear he inspired, and he made it clear that he knew exactly why the parents were there. He spoke in riddles and threats, suggesting that he had information about their daughters, but that such information came at a very high price. Instead of calling police or letting them leave, Laffinger made a decision that would prove to be his downfall. He ordered his men to lock Marissa and David in a basement area of the ranch, apparently intending to decide their fate later. It was a decision born of arrogance and the belief that he was untouchable after years of avoiding prosecution. Basement where they were imprisoned was not what they expected. It was a large, well-ventilated space that had clearly been designed for long-term occupation. There were multiple rooms, basic furniture, and evidence that people had been living there for extended periods. But they were not alone. In the dim light of the basement, 3 women emerged from the shadows. They were pale, malnourished, and clearly traumatized, but as they stepped closer, Marissa felt her heart stop. One of the women was April, her daughter, now 33 years old but still recognizable despite the years of hardship etched on her face. The reunion was beyond anything that words could describe. 20 years of wondering, hoping, grieving, and never giving up had led to this moment. April collapsed into her mother's arms, and for several minutes, neither could speak through their tears. The other 2 women were Kira Thompson and Hannah Lee, also survivors of their 20-year ordeal. Through tears and broken voices, the 3 women told their story. On the night they disappeared, they had been approached by Vincent Caraway after the competition. He had told them there was a last-minute change of plans and that they needed to come with him for a special meeting with potential sponsors. Trusting their coach completely, the 6 girls had gotten into his van. Instead of taking them to a meeting, Caraway had driven them to an isolated location where they had been drugged and transported to Laffinger's ranch. They had been held captive ever since, forced to live in the underground facility and endure years of abuse and psychological manipulation. The operation was much larger than just their case. Laffinger had been trafficking people for decades, using his ranch as a base for various illegal activities. The most heartbreaking part of the story was learning about the other 3 girls. Rachel Collins had died during a failed escape attempt in 2001, killed by Laffinger's men when she tried to run. Amber Green had succumbed to untreated pneumonia in 2005, her death the result of deliberate medical neglect. Lily Rivera had died just 3 years earlier, her health finally broken by years of captivity and abuse. The survivors had endured by supporting each other and maintaining hope that someday they would be rescued. They had never given up believing that their families were still looking for them, and that belief had kept them alive through the darkest moments of their captivity. While this emotional reunion was taking place in the basement, events were unfolding above ground that would finally bring justice. Sarah, the waitress who had helped the parents, had become worried when they didn't return to their car as planned. She had called the police, that she had helped 2 people investigate a ranch where she suspected illegal activity was taking place. Detective Holbrook, who had been monitoring the situation closely, immediately assembled a tactical team. The discovery of the uniforms, the earring, and the connection to Laffinger had given them enough evidence to obtain a search warrant for the ranch. The fact that 2 civilians were potentially in danger gave them the justification they needed to act immediately. The raid on Laffinger's ranch was swift and overwhelming. SWAT teams surrounded the property while negotiators tried to establish contact with Laffinger. The criminal, realizing that his 20-year operation was finally crumbling, attempted to destroy evidence and escape through a tunnel system that connected various buildings on the property, but there was nowhere to run. Vincent Caraway, who had been attempting to flee the state, was arrested at a highway checkpoint. Under interrogation, he revealed the full scope of the operation, hoping to receive a lighter sentence in exchange for his cooperation. His confession provided the final pieces of evidence needed to convict Laffinger and his associates. The rescue of the 3 survivors made international news. The story of their survival, their family's never-ending search, and the chance discovery by a hiker and his dog captured the world's attention. The courage of the parents, who had risked everything to find their daughters, was praised by law enforcement and the media. For the Green family, the joy of finding April alive was tempered by the grief of losing Amber. 20 years of hoping that both daughters would come home had ended with the bittersweet reality that only one had survived. But they were grateful beyond words for the miracle of April's survival and the FA's opportunity to help her heal from her ordeal. The legal proceedings took years to complete. Laffinger was eventually sentenced to life in prison without parole, convicted on multiple counts of kidnapping, human trafficking, and murder. Vincent Carraway received a sentence of 50 years for his role in the initial abduction and years of enabling the trafficking operation. Several other associates were also convicted and sentenced to significant prison terms. The three survivors faced a long and difficult road to recovery. Years of captivity had left deep psychological scars that would take extensive therapy and support to heal. However, they had each other, and they had families who had never stopped loving them or believing in their return. Their strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship inspired everyone who heard their story. The case also led to significant changes in how missing persons cases are handled, particularly those involving multiple victims. The 20-year delay in solving the case highlighted the need for better coordination between agencies and more sophisticated investigative techniques. The families became advocates for other families dealing with missing loved ones, using their experience to help improve the system. Today, the survivors continue their healing journey, supported by their families and communities. Their story serves as a testament to the power of never giving up hope, the importance of family bonds that transcend time and circumstance, and the reality that sometimes the most incredible stories of survival happen in the most unlikely circumstances. The discovery of those cheerleading uniforms in the Arizona desert was the key that unlocked 20 years of mystery and pain. But it was the love of families who refused to stop searching, the dedication of investigators who never forgot the case, and the incredible strength of three young women who survived against all odds that truly solved this remarkable case. This story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, hope can survive, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen when we least expect them. The 6 cheerleaders who vanished in 1995 will never be forgotten, 3 for their tragic fate and 3 for their miraculous survival, and the families who never stopped believing they would come home.